My name is Gerald Kennedy, and I'm here to talk about my educational workshops that I do with Aptus Marketing Group. I'm in my 17th year in the financial services industry. I've been working exclusively with seniors for the last 9 years. My workshops, I feel, are more of a financial conversation with seniors. I've built my practice on sitting on the same side of the table as the clients. And the beautiful thing about being an independent broker and working with Aptus is it's my goal to sit with the clients on one side of the table, find out their financial goals, and then achieve those goals through the companies in which Aptus is willing to market me through. After years of working with Aptus Marketing, I approached Jeff Hutchinson about ways of marketing myself to a larger spectrum of people. Jeff first introduced me to the senior financial workshops, and I was very reluctant. I had heard a lot of stories about senior workshops and the horror stories, so to speak, within the industries about how they were hard to fill. They were difficult to market. They were expensive. I took the leap of faith and I decided that I was going to develop my own system. I was going to look at this as a way of saying, let's simplify financial planning. Too often seniors are confused by the financial market. They're confused because I feel that brokers have a fear of being expendable. So the easiest way is to just confuse the client to the point of saying, okay, I have it under control, you don't need to understand it. That's not exactly what Aptus does. What Aptus in my workshop specializes in is simplifying the financial process. Sitting down with the client and showing them that the same things that mattered to them when they got married, when they were young, still matter today. What's coming into this household? What's going out of this household? And what do we do with the extra at the end of the day? How can we protect our assets? How can we make sure that our loved ones are protected in the event of our absence? And how can we transition our estate with as small as possible expense and losing out on probate and expense court costs? We're different. We're a workshop where if someone walks in the middle of the workshop or if someone has a question, we've designed a system that is not a textbook. It's not something where if you miss a slide or if you don't understand something that's said to you, that it's going to completely throw you off your track. Our workshop is a conversation with a group of people. I've had numerous times where at the end of the workshop I'd approach people with questions and they've said to me, you know, I've been to 10 of these workshops, but this is the first time I'm going to set an appointment because I actually understood your topics today. We're going to show you how to simplify the financial planning aspect of the workshop. We're going to show you how it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to be a model presenter in this type of system. This is something that the common advisor gives them the ability to translate this information, deliver the information the seniors are looking for, and give them enough information that one topic is going to stimulate their thought process. Out of the 7 to 8 topics we talk about in a workshop, it only takes one to set that appointment. When Aptus approached me about teaching my presentation across the country to other advisors, I was very excited about the opportunity. My practice after this many years has given me the success to be able to say yes or no to certain marketing groups that have approached me about certain presentations. My passion equals the passion that Aptus has about helping people. We all have children and we all care about the next generation. This workshop is truly set up to help our children's generation. When we talk about the workshop, we've pretty much worked all the bugs out of this system. We're going to start with the mailer program. We have vetted numerous mailing houses. We have a pretty good idea of how to mail and who is going to come to your workshop. We talk about how to set up the workshop and what restaurants and venues make the most sense. Things such as how to set up the room, what forms to have at the table, how to set up the tables, how to mix existing clients into your workshop to make your workshop more effective, the slide presentation, the appointment process. This is not something where you're going to receive this DVD series and then everything's over at that point. You're going to receive mentoring. You're going to have the opportunity to have podcasts. You're going to have the opportunity to talk one-on-one with myself after 8 years of me doing these workshops successfully. You're going to have the opportunity to ask questions one-on-one. We're looking to train advisors so that we can impact a large group of people within the United States and truly make a difference.
We can do it. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. I I might have to put a +1 at your table if that's okay.
That doesn't matter.
What I'd like to do today, first of all, when I get started, is kind of take a quick survey of my room as far as my age groups. Anybody in here 55 to 60? All right. 61 to 65? All right. 66 to 70? And anybody 71 and above? Okay. I ask a lot of questions of the crowd, so we'll have a good time. Financial, how old am I? I'm 41. But I remind my wife I look 20-something all the time. She does not buy that, though. Today, financial planning is a little bit like a medicine sometimes. It's not a one-size-fits-all. You've got some notes here, some places to take some notes. Write down any questions you may have. At the end, I'll make my way around as we have dinner and answer any questions I can. And then we'll try and have a good time. Financial planning sometimes can be a little dry, so we probably try and have a good time with it and have some fun. We'll jump right in. Today, what we're going to talk about is your retirement house and what's inside your retirement house. Your retirement house holds your assets as well as your income. Now, when you think back over your lifetime and you think about the major assets that were purchased in your lifetime, things such as homes, rental properties, land, possibly boats, motorcycles, all of those major assets, no problem, shared one thing. They were all insured. They were insured, so in the event of, is she trying to find some, get to someone?
Going to the back,
Oh, okay.
I apologize.
Take her through the kitchen right around. No problem. She's going to take her around. All of those assets shared one common thing. They were all insured. They were insured, so in the event of something happening to one of those major assets, that it was returned back to the way it was when they originally purchased it. Now, what people don't realize is that you can insure your income as well as your assets. You can insure the streamline of income. You can insure where that income comes from. You can insure that income from market fluctuation or economic downturn. You can ensure that you never outlive that income and that that income is there for not only yourself, but your surviving spouse. And once you have your assets and income properly insured, then you're going to want to put those into an estate plan. An estate plan is basically a document that protects your assets and income while you're alive and then distributes those assets and income in the event of your premature death. Now, some of the things we're going to talk about today, one of them is estate planning. Estate planning was created to avoid the unnecessary. Has anyone ever settled someone's estate in this room, a loved one? A couple people. Easy or hard, sir?
Lawyer helped a lot.
Lawyer helped for free?
Yeah.
There you go. That's good. Someone over here? Ever settle an estate?
Does a lot, but doesn't do it for free.
It doesn't do it for, okay. In estate planning, in the 15 years I've been doing this, it seems like there's only one or two ways. It's either done properly and it's very easy and it rolls off the back like water off a duck's back, or it's something that could take years and years and create a lot of hassles and delays. So what are we trying to avoid when we talk about estate planning? We're trying to avoid hassles. We're trying to avoid delays. We're trying to avoid courts. We're trying to avoid expenses. And we're trying to avoid lawyers. No offense to anybody if somebody's a lawyer in this room. Excuse me one second. Robin, could you come back over and shut this door, please? And obviously, we're trying to avoid probate. Probate fees are calculated on debts as well as assets. It is your gross estate, not your net worth, that is subject to probate. Now, I come from this area, so this area is very near and dear to my heart. My uncle was mayor of South Vienna, not too far from here. My mom was from West Jefferson and was one of the ox roast queens, so I got that going for me. My dad actually was from Old Columbus Road and grew up in Old Columbus Road and was from London. My cousins were superintendent of Springfield City Schools, so this area is very near and dear to me. I'm from a farm community. And oftentimes when I've dealt with farmers in the past, one of the misconceptions is this exact thing. It is your gross estate, not your net worth, that is subject to probate. See, the government doesn't care whether you have a debt on something or not. Oftentimes I'll have a farmer come into my firm and they'll say, Jerry, I've got the farm, but I still owe money on the farm. Well, it's not the gap of your equity that goes through probate, it's the whole farm that goes through probate. Wills are an engraved invitation to probate court. When you think back over your lifetime, who has children? Okay, let me use you guys because you're right in the front row. When you're young and you sat down and you designed that will's designed for a time in your life where you sat down and you said, okay, we've got the kids, and if something happens to us, here's who we want the kids to go to. Now, it's very fresh in my mind because I just did that. I have a 3-year-old, and me and my wife sat down and we did that not too long ago, and it was a lot easier to come up with a list of people I knew we didn't want the baby to go to than it was the list of people we did want the baby to go to. But that will, when you're young, it serves that purpose. But as you get older, a will becomes an engraved invitation to probate court. Take a moment and think about everything attached to your Social Security number. Your IRAs, your 401ks, your bank accounts, your savings accounts, CDs, the deeds to your home, the titles to your cars. See, what people don't understand is that Social Security number is your account number to the federal government. So sometimes as you get older, a will simply turns into something listing your assets and makes it very easy to add up a probate court cost. How can I defend myself against probate, estate taxes, and lawsuits? One of the first things people want to avoid is a public notice. My grandfather, being a farmer, didn't want everything going into the newspaper in the event of something happening to him. So he wanted to avoid that notice going into the newspaper as far as his estate. Want to avoid creditors. Now, my people that are over 70, does everybody in here remember a lady named Marilyn Monroe? Marilyn Monroe was a very iconic figure. Died very early in life, had a tremendous amount of wealth, had a tremendous amount of popularity, but it was less than 2 decades ago that Marilyn's estate finally settled. Reason being is, without proper estate planning, all sorts of things can challenge your estate. One of the big things that hit Marilyn's estate was creditors. Anyone that ever felt that they had a special relationship with Marilyn, anyone that had ever mowed Marilyn's grass or had painted part of her home or brought her a piece of pie, when she passed away, challenged her estate. So it took decades for that estate to settle. Obviously, we want to avoid probate costs. We want to avoid estate taxes. And if at all possible, we want to avoid having to pay a lawyer an hourly fee to go through things that we could take care of ourselves. How can we do that? We can do that very simply by creating a detour by using a trust. Now, a trust is a legal document written in common language. And what that means is it's the lawyer's job to sit down with you and to find out your exact wants and needs, the way you want your estate to be protected and the way you want your estate to be distributed. Now, I retired my old secretary 3 years ago, and she doesn't mind me talking about this because it's just a good example. She had 3 children. She had 1 daughter who had her original allowance money. She saved every cent, very good with money. Then she had 2 sons that she liked to use the term that money burnt a hole in their pocket. Does anybody know anybody like that?
Yeah, I had one.
You had one? They do exist. And unfortunately, her goal was, in the event of something happening to her and her husband, she wanted to make sure those boys were protected and taken care of from themselves. So we designed her trust so in the event of something happening to her and her husband, her daughter would inherit her money immediately. And her sons would inherit their inheritance when they turned 65 years old. Now that's aggressive, but that was her wishes. So in her eyes, she knew those boys would be employed, but at some point if they didn't save, that there would be proper money set aside for them for retirement. Has anyone ever dealt with a trust in this room? A couple people. Trusts are complicated, unfortunately. There's thousands of different types. There's maybe 5 that are very commonly used in the United States and can be used very effectively. And if they're used properly, at the time of death, there is no probate costs. It's very easy to settle. Additional must-have documents. A living will. An advanced health care directive. A durable financial power of attorney, which enables you to name a person you want to handle your financial affairs should you become incapacitated. And a durable medical power of attorney. Now, I'm going to share a secret with you. These are free. Now, you could pay a lawyer to draw them up, But there are documents on the internet that are approved by every hospital in the state of Ohio, and as long as you have someone check them and make sure they're set up properly, you should never be charged for these type of documents. Every 5 to 6 years, the Board of Health updates these documents, and your financial people should help you update your documents. But never pay for these things. Now, why are these important? Does anybody watch the news, like put it on in the morning and just leave it on all day long? I know it's so positive, right? The news a couple years ago, I went to the dentist, and I had forgotten all about this story, but does anybody remember a young lady named Terry Shrivo? And that was a big news story for a long time. It was on Fox, it was on CNN, it was on all the major news networks, and it was basically the story about this young lady. She was in her 30s. She got struck down with this terminal illness. It took her apart pretty quick, and then she passed, but it was about the fight that her family had to take her off of life support with the hospital. Now, I remember this story because I was at the dentist's office, and I went to Newsweek. Picked up a Newsweek magazine, and there was an article inside the Newsweek magazine about Terry Shrivo. And the last paragraph of the article talked about her estate. See, she was young, but she didn't have any of these things. But what she did have was a considerable amount of wealth for someone her age. She owned her home. She had a tremendous savings account. She had a 401k. She had inherited some money from a loved one, but she didn't have any of her wishes down on paper. So that fight between her family and the hospital, the last paragraph addressed. It was interesting to me because you hit a break point in your health insurance in your lifetime. And that break point's an amount of money that that insurance is willing to pay over your lifetime. The last paragraph in this Newsweek article was about the family reunion that they threw for Mrs. Shrivo, and where they passed around a hat just to be able to gather enough money to give her a final resting place. The hospital expenses has eaten away her entire estate. See, financial planning's like when you're building a house of cards when you're a kid. And you're setting at the table and you're putting those cards together and you're careful. You don't buy things you don't need, and you try and save the right amount of money, and you try and be frugal. But unfortunately, with financial planning, it's like that house of cards sometimes. It only takes one hit to that table for it to all come crumbling down. Now, this yellow sheet today is just to kind of stimulate your thought process, to kind of gauge where you are on these topics. If estate planning is something you'd like some more information on, I'd like you to put a number 1 in challenge number 1's box. If estate planning is something that you just like some more information, or you wouldn't mind making sure that yours are in order, you want to make sure that everything, your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted, put a number 2. And if estate planning is something you're completely confident of, I'd like you to put a number 3. Challenge number 2, inflation. This is one of my favorite ones to talk about. I had a professor one time that called inflation the invisible enemy. And it didn't make sense to me at the time because I was young. And inflation doesn't really hit us from one year to the next as much as it hits us from decade to decade. Like, for example, do you remember how much you made an hour on your first job?
Yeah, $2.
$2 an hour. What about you?
$1.65.
$1.65. Sir?
$1.75.
$1.75.
75 cents.
75. We needed this guy's employment people there. I remember mine. Mine was $3 an hour because it was a job I got in Columbus at a butcher shop. And it was just horrible. The job at 14 and a half, you're not the guy at the counter when you're 14 and a half. You're the guy cleaning up everything at the end of the night. It's just a really bad job. Now, inflation is one of those things when you look back at it and you think about those jobs, the 75 cents an hour, the $1.75, how much was your first car?
Used one, you mean?
Yeah, first car you ever owned.
300
$300.
bucks.
50.
1500.
1500. 50. Mine was $1,000. And the reason I remember it so well is because, well, we'll get into that in a minute. That's a good story. You won't believe this. But inflation does exist. Think about this for a moment. 30 years ago today, 30 years ago, you could take a $100,000 CD, you could take 1 year of your interest, and you could pay cash for a Cadillac. That's hard to remember, isn't it? It's almost staggering. That's a fact. 30 years ago, if you had a $100,000 CD, you could take 1 year's interest and buy a Cadillac. Now, the government wants us to think that nothing's changed, that we can still buy $50 cars, and $1.75 an hour has kept up, that the cost of living and those things are easy. Now, the reason I remember, and I always like when I ask, when we teach these workshops, I always ask the men, I'll ask somebody what they made an hour in their first job, and they'll go, oh, I don't know. And then I'll say, how much was your first car? And they'll go, $50. They always remember that one. I remember my first car because I went to my dad, And a buddy of mine grabbed us, and we were Friday afternoon. We didn't have schools in the summer, and he took us around to these lots called paydays. Does anybody remember those in Columbus? Paydays were the cars that were just not really safe for normal everyday people. So they sold them to the 16-year-olds that needed first cars. And I found it a 1976 Mustang that a magnet could not stick to the side of. There was so much Bondo in this car. But it was white, it had blue racing stripes, and I wanted it in the worst way. So I went home and I went to my dad and I said, I need $1,000 for this Mustang. He said, okay. As soon as he said okay, he goes, I'll teach you responsibility. Now I'm shaking because all I heard was okay. I needed $1,000. He said, okay, but you're going to pay me back $100 a month for a year. Great. I ran out of the house. Now, what did I learn that day? I learned my dad was willing to charge me 20% interest. And I learned not to sign any loans and shake until we read the fine print. Now, the government wants us to think that those things haven't changed. And in a lot of ways, things haven't changed. You could still take that $100,000 CD. You could still take 1 year of your interest today, and you could still pay cash for a Cadillac. What's changed is the Cadillac. So maximizing our money is more important than ever, especially in the economy with everything going on in Washington. How can we spend the same dollar twice? How can we maximize our income? Now, how long do you need your retirement income to last? The government did a survey a few years ago, and they looked at the average retirement. The average retirement in the United States is 19 years. You've got 2 people, 3 meals a day. They allocate $5 a meal, so we're going to eat at McDonald's, breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day. 365 days a year. That means for basic food expenses alone for the average retirement is $208,050. Now that's just food. What's not included in that $208,000? Utilities, clothing, heat, prescriptions, gas, all those weird things we've become so accustomed to liking to have. $208,000 in just basic food expenses. Now, there is a silver lining to this. If you eat at McDonald's 3 times a day, you'll never last than 19 years. So we've got that going for us. Now, I had a gentleman come into my firm a few years ago, and I had retired his brother from General Motors before it was a casino, when General Motors was still General Motors. And he came to me, and he had invested $150,000 with me the year before. Now, he came back after a year, and he came to me, and he said, Jerry, they've told me at General Motors, and I'm too old to work now, and they're retiring me. So we sat down. Now, he walked in my office, and he had this big, long legal piece of paper, and on the left side of the piece of paper was all his expenses. I mean everything. Property tax, utilities, license plates, haircuts, you name it. Everything was on the left side of this piece of paper. On the right side of this piece of paper was his General Motors pension, Social Security, a small military pension, and a rental property income he had. And at the bottom was a big circle with negative $650. He was $650 short of his average expenses on a monthly basis and the income he had coming in due to being retired. So I asked him, I said, Bob, we've got that $150,000 IRA. We're fine. He said, no. He said, Jerry, I've got 6 brothers and sisters. He goes, we were raised very old-fashioned, and my parents didn't really plan, unfortunately. So when my parents passed away, all of my brothers and sisters, we all had to pull money together to give them a final resting place. So it was very important to me. At that time, I made a decision that that $150,000 was going to be the jump on life for my kids. I wanted to give them something. So I asked him, I said, well, what if? What if we can create that $650 a month that you want for retirement while protecting that estate? What if we can make sure it's inflation-proof and that you can't outlive it? I said, give me a week. And in a week, he came back, and we looked at maximizing his money. We looked at simply taking money from one pocket and putting it in the other pocket. Now, notice what I didn't say. I didn't say spending the money. Simply changing the way in which we take income from the money. Now, I want to clarify one thing before I go any further. I'm not talking about mutual funds. I'm not talking about stocks. I'm not talking about variable investments. I'm not a fan of people that are in their retirement years being in the stock market. Reason being is we can't afford the ups and downs that the stock market has. So when you want your income to be consistent, you can't take a 10, 15% loss. So everything we talk about today is fixed income products. Products that have no ability for loss. Now what we did is we took his $150,000 and we separated it into 4 separate IRAs. We separated into one IRA for $37,000, a second IRA for $28,000, a third IRA for $21,000, and a fourth IRA for $62,000. Now, what this is called split funding. We're going to simply create an income vehicle out of the first IRA. The first IRA is a simple, immediate payout IRA. That's an agreement between you and a financial institution that says, you hand me $37,911, and I will give you $710 a month for 5 years. It's as simple as that. Now, what that allows us to do by split funding, by changing the way in which we take income from the money, is the first month that the first IRA spits out $710 for income for my client, the other 3 IRAs compound and gain $710 in interest. So after 30 days, he's taken $710 for income and earned $710 in interest. So after the first month, if something were to happen to my client, the entire $150,000 estate that he wanted to go to his children is still available. So we look at 5 years. 5 years goes by. The first IRA is now empty. We've enjoyed $710 a month for 5 years, knowing the entire estate was available to our children in the event of our death. But inflation has kicked in. The cost of goods and services have gone up. The first IRA is gone. The second IRA has compounded from $28,000 to $40,000. The third IRA is compounded from $21,000 to $30,000. And the fourth IRA is compounded from $62,000 to $89,000. My client's still alive. He still needs income. So we take $797 a month off the second IRA for the next 5 years. So now we've gone 10 years. That second IRA is now empty. We're still alive. We still need income. Our estate is still $42,000 and $129,000. The estate for our children is still there. So we take income from the third IRA at $895 a month. So what have we accomplished by separating those IRAs, by split funding those IRAs? We've created 20 years worth of inflation-proof income. Every day in those 20 years, that estate that was so valuable to my client to go to his children was available to them every day of that 20 years. And now we have the option of turning around and doing it all over again. So if inflation is a concern to you, if you feel like your retirement dollars are not giving you what you deserve and you're concerned with maximizing your income, I'd like you to go ahead and mark challenge number 2, inflation. Now, I'm going to keep going because I only have 4 more hours of this. I just wanted to see who was paying attention. Challenge number 3, income taxes. Income taxes is one of those neat things because Uncle Sam, if you remember when you were a kid, Uncle Sam was this really cool guy. Uncle Sam was all about the 4th of July and Yankee Doodle Dandy and fireworks and all that fun stuff. I found out about Uncle Sam on my job at the butcher shop. I was getting ready to turn 15. I had a high-interest auto loan to this shark in my family. And I needed to pay back that loan, so I took that job at the butcher shop. Now, it was $3 an hour. It was in between my summer of 8th and 9th grade year, and I was getting 40 hours a week. So it was pretty simple math. I knew for a fact that come Friday, I'd have 120 bucks. Friday rolls around, the payroll lady gives me my check, I pull it out of the envelope, and I look at her and I go, "You've made a mistake." And she laughed. I couldn't figure out why, and I went home, I showed it to my grandfather, and he goes, "That's Uncle Sam." Immediately changed overnight. So I found out that if I earned income, he taxed it. So I asked my grandfather, "What do I do?" He said, "Go buy something, it'll make you feel better." Long financial planning roots. So I got in a newspaper, and there was a place called Columbus Car Audios. Anybody remember that? Well, they had this thing called a cassette player. And I had to have it. I mean, this was newfangled technology at the time. So in the ad, $99.95 was this beautiful cassette player, Pioneer. So I cashed that paycheck. I took 5 $20 bills, and I headed to Columbus Car Audio with my buddy. And I got to the register, and that lady had made the same mistake the payroll lady had made, only in the opposite direction. Because it didn't ring up for $99.95 for some reason. So I found out that if I spent it, he taxed it. So I said, I'll fool him. I saved every single dime minus the $100 a month for the next year. And guess what happened then? I got another notice and found out that if I saved money, he taxed me then also. Shortly after that, my grandfather passed away, and the word estate sale that I had always been familiar with growing up on a farm made all the sense in the world, because that was the first time I figured out what it was. And I watched everything he had ever worked for in his life get taxed. So now we're in a position where Uncle Sam, if we earn money, we spend money, we save money, and when we die, the tax man's standing there with his hand out. Now, the good news and bad news about taxes. Rolling out of an election is always fun. The good news, the government wants to tax the rich, increase the tax burden on the rich. People love hearing that, tax the rich. And it's always like that Wizard of Oz. I always wonder where these rich people are. This magical bazillion, gazillionaires. Oh, we're not taxing you, we're going to tax all those other people. That's the good news, taxing the rich. Here's the bad news. Most likely you're rich in their eyes. Now, you might not feel that way, but earnings over $56,401 places you in the top 25% of wage earners in the United States. You're the rich that they're talking about taxing. How many people in this room would like to have more income? Yeah. How many people would like to pay less tax? Obviously, how can we do both? How much you save for retirement and the way you take income from that savings is equally important and will determine the amount of tax you have to pay. Who in this room has ever heard of a split annuity? One person. Who's ever heard of the annuity exclusion rule? Any accountants? Who's ever heard of annuities? Lots of people. Where do annuities come from? Common answer. It is. Actually, annuities were created in Rome, actually. They were created to finance wars. You know, those wars and the Romans went to fight were expensive. So they went out and they said, give me a certain amount of money and I'll pay you back over your lifetime. That was the first annuity. The second annuity started in the United States during the Revolutionary War. We needed muskets. British were coming. So we went out, we took money from citizens, and we agreed to pay them for the rest of their lives. Then annuities became what were called paper. Now, is anybody familiar with this? You got real good eyes? Excellent. Read that word real loud for me right there.
No, well, wait a minute. Let me put my running lights on here.
Here, no, I'm just joking.
Annuity?
Yeah, right there, right on the dollar bill. See, back when we had gold, people started getting robbed. So the government came up with promissory notes, small little annuities. So if you had a certain amount of gold, you could trade it in and they'd give you this paper money that had a certain amount of value. Now, maybe it's not worth as much as it was last week, but it holds a certain amount of value. Now, the neat thing about fixed annuities is fixed annuities are regulated by the state of Ohio, which means if you invest money into a fixed annuity, and let's say you put $100,000 in there, they have to back it dollar for dollar. So if you have $100,000 in a fixed annuity, you have to have $100,000 by that financial institution backing your money, dollar for dollar. Who's ever heard of the FDIC? Now, the FDIC is a group of litigators. In the event of a bank going out of business, their job is to find another bank to buy that bank. So if Bank A fails, hopefully Bank B buys them. If Bank B goes out of business, hopefully Bank C will, and D and E and F, and on down the stream. Now, this dollar will back $1,000 in your checking and savings account through the FDIC. Does anyone watch the news and you hear them talk about this bank's failing to achieve their reserves? Has anyone ever heard that saying? Like last week, Huntington Bank had problems with their reserves. What that basically means is they didn't have the $1 for every 1,000 to send to the FDIC. Now, what's C? The C stand for in FDIC? Corporation. Guess what corporations are allowed to do under the law in the United States? General Motors did it a few years ago. They're allowed to file bankruptcy. That's the reason there's the C on the FDIC. Now, when we look at annuities, the annuity exclusion rule is a simple tax code. It basically says that if you receive a payment under an annuity, life insurance or endowment contract is received as an annuity, payable at regular intervals for a period of more than 1 full year from the starting date, all or part may be tax-free. All or part may be tax-free. Now, this doesn't apply to everyone. It applies to maybe 3 out of 10 people. But I can guarantee you that if you're the one that it does apply to, the IRS isn't going to come to you. Income tax reduction. In 1986, Alan Betty's $200,000 certificate of deposit earned 8% interest or $16,000. What's the highest CD interest rate you can remember? 14, 15. I have a 16-year-old, and she had to do a book report on The Outsiders. Does anybody remember that book? And I went down in the basement, and I found my copy of The Outsiders. And it had a piece of paper that I was given when I opened my state savings bank, a little newspaper piece, inside the book. I opened it up, and it was fascinating to me because on that piece of paper from state savings, it said if you'd invest $10,000 and you leave it alone for 2 years, they give you 20% interest. That was your punishment for losing liquidity. Now today, a $200,000 CD earns 4%. I'm being very nice on the CDs there. Fully taxable interest, which equals $8,000. In a 28% tax bracket, that's $2,240 in taxes per year, or $11,200 in taxes paid in 5 years. Now, Al and Betty could split fund their $200,000 CD into 2 guaranteed short-term annuities. We're going to have a $200,000 that we previously had setting in a CD. We're going to split fund that into 2 guaranteed short-term annuities. The first annuity is going to have $53,966 in it. It's going to pay us $1,000 a month for 5 years. We're going to receive $60,000 at the end of 5 years. That contract is now empty. It allows us to defer $146,033. Tax equivalent yield is 6.5%. At the end of 5 years, we have our $200,000 again. Now that's good, but the best part of this is the tax savings. We have a tax savings in a 28% tax bracket in 5 years of $15,120. We received an additional income of $20,000 in 5 years. Meaning by changing the way in which we take income from our money, we are $35,120 ahead in just a 5-year period of time. So if income taxes, if you feel you're paying too much in income taxes, are a challenge for you, then I want you to mark challenge number 3, income taxes. Challenge number 4, Social Security taxation. We had a president in this country a few years ago that sat in front of the TV one night and slammed his hand on the pedestal and basically screamed at the TV and said that over his dead body would we ever raise taxation on Social Security. Now I see you smiling back there. I know you know who I'm talking about. That was that young man. And he kept his promise because it was after he passed away that they actually increased taxation on Social Security. Now years later, we have another president that came along, and when he said we had to increase taxation on Social Security, he said it is what it is. So where are we? Well, if you're single and you make $25,000, 50% of your Social Security is taxed as ordinary income. If you make $32,000, 85% of your Social Security is taxed as ordinary income. Now you get a little bit of a bump if you're married. Up to $32,000 puts you in a 50% bracket, and up to $44,000 puts you in an 85% bracket. I handle lump sum retirees. That's been my job for the last 15 years. I work with Columbia Gas. I work with the State Department. A lot of people come to me and they get a lump sum retirement. And when we structure those lump sum retirements, we always structure them in the event of something happening to the retiree, the wife will receive the same income that that person received for the rest of her life, meaning that her income stays the same. But what people don't realize that if you make $32,000 and you're married and you become a widow or widower, your tax bracket goes up. These are things you have to plan for. Social Security taxation. David and Lisa are both retired and collecting Social Security benefits. Due to other income they have, they may be paying tax on 85% of their Social Security. David and Lisa will pay tax on $18,256 of their Social Security benefits, or they could elect to use a custom deferral strategy. In this case, 2 specifically designed annuities to shelter their interest and dividends from current taxation. After implementing this split fund strategy, David and Lisa are required to pay tax on only $2,277 of their Social Security, down from $18,256. Now, before we adjusted, their total adjusted gross income was $63,255. They received standard deductions of $9,650. They received exemptions of $6,000, making their taxable income $47,605, making the check they cut to the government $6,441. Now we changed the way in which they took income from their money, but they had the exact same amount of money coming in on a monthly basis. but now their taxes look like this. Their adjusted gross income is now down to $28,091. They get the same deduction. They get the same exemptions, making their adjusted gross income down to $12,441, making the check to the government $1,244. Same income on a monthly basis. We changed the way in which they took income from their investments. Total tax savings realized annually, $5,197. Total tax savings over a 5-year period of time, $25,985 setting in their savings account rather than setting with the federal government. So if you feel you're paying too much in taxes on your Social Security, or if Social Security is a concern, I'd like you to mark challenge number 4, Social Security. Challenge number 5, long-term care. Has anyone ever had a loved one in a nursing home? Couple? How much was it, sir? Do you remember?
No, I wouldn't have a clue.
$7,000 a month right now.
Sir?
And that's not Alzheimer's.
That's just a little help here and there.
Alzheimer's is about
Between 6 and 7,000.
6 and 7,000. My grandparents lived, everybody familiar with West Jefferson, Arbors in West Jefferson? My grandparents lived directly across the street from Arbors in their house before they passed away. And they wanted to go to Arbors in the event of, so I could never understand that because my grandfather's so meticulous. I thought, oh, that'll be great. You'll just go nuts every single day that you sit there and the guy hasn't mowed their yard yet. But they wanted to go to Arbors. Now they were in fine shape for their age for the first few years, which was $11,000 a month for the two of them. But then my grandmother developed something called sundowners. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. It's a rare type of Alzheimer's, where she needed to be watched pretty much 24 hours a day, which shot it up to about $16,000 a month for the two of them. Long-term care. An Employee Benefits Research Institute did a survey of Americans. Health care ranks ahead of the economy, the war, the budget deficit, education, and taxes as our most critical national issue. It ranks evenly with terrorism and national security. We worry about our health care almost as much as we worry about someone attacking our country. Many retirees buy long-term care insurance when they don't need to. If you live on the peak of a mountaintop, I mean your house is on the peak, and you go to your insurance agent, you tell him you want flood insurance, will he sell it to you? Oh, you'll have flood insurance. If you have a brand new car with 5 miles on it and you go down the street here to Buckeye and you tell them you don't like it, you want a new one, will they sell you a new one? Yeah. People will sell you whatever you're willing to buy. Now, whether you need it or not, or whether it fits your situation or not, that's another question. Statistically, people who fall prey to this have committed no crime. They've done nothing wrong, but are reduced to poverty level in 13 weeks over something they can't control. Who's ever heard of Medicaid spin down? Has anyone ever heard of that term? Do you know the number of Medicaid spin down now? It's about $1,500. Now, I always think Medicaid spin down, I think of that movie, The Titanic. Has everybody seen that? Everybody's in the water floating. Medicaid spin down is basically the time right when you're starting to take your first couple gulps of water, and then they toss you a life preserver. Because Medicaid spin down means you have to spin down through all of your assets, all of your cash, even to the point of sometimes having to sell your residence, till you hit $1,500, until you take those first couple gulps of water, and then they throw you a life preserver. You have a 1 in 244 chance of making a major claim against your homeowner's insurance in your lifetime. You have a 1 in 44 chance of making a major claim against your auto insurance. You have a 1 in 2 chance of spending some sort of time in a nursing home or in an assisted living center. It means 1 out of every 2 people. Now, we're not talking about a lifetime, like someone is living there for the rest of their life or something, but like my mother, she had to have her hip replaced last year. She spent 90 days in a nursing home. Those type of things. You don't have to absorb this risk. The way you structure your estate and the way you structure your financial plan will determine your risk. Now, this is a gentleman and his wife that was referred to me. And when they first walked in, I asked them about their finances. We went through everything, and they hit me with a classic line. And this line always scares me. They said, yeah, we've got long-term care insurance from a friend of ours at church. Now, that one, it gets me every now and then. So I asked to look at it. They pulled it out and showed it to me. They were 65 years old. They paid $4,250 a year for long-term care insurance. Now, the first thing I asked them was longevity. They were both 65. all 4 parents were still alive, living on their own. Lots of longevity in this family. What that basically means is if they live 20 years, they will pay $85,100 into a long-term care contract. If they turn around and live those 20 years and they never use it, that means that $85,100 is gone and they've received 0 benefits and they have 0 to show for it. Now, what they could have done is what's called asset-based long-term care. Now, asset-based long-term care is a little different, but almost identical to what you're doing now. And what I mean by that is, before the government's willing to help you, what are they going to try and take? Your assets. So how can we structure these assets properly to maximize your situation? Ask yourself this question. If I were to go into a nursing home, where would that money come from? Oftentimes people will say, well, my savings, my IRAs. Now, I know it's hard to part with your savings right now because the banks are paying us all a lot of interest. That was a good one. But what you could do is maximize your savings account. For example, if you have a $32,000 savings account, $32,000 sitting there, and that savings account's for emergencies. If you were to deposit that $32,000 into an asset-based long-term care contract, it would immediately start earning tax-deferred interest and is 100% money-back guaranteed. I'm going to say that again. Tax-deferred interest, 100% money-back guaranteed. You want the money back in 90 days, they send it to you. You want the money back in a year, they send it to you. Now, from day one, if something were to happen to you and you were to prematurely pass away, that $32,000 pays $66,560 to your beneficiary tax-free. So that same $32,000 setting in your savings account, earning no interest, if something were to happen to you, will double to pay a death benefit to your loved ones. If nothing happens to you, but something happens to your health, that same $32,000 is worth $199,680 in health care benefit. That means that same $32,000 will create $2,773 a month for home health care, nursing home, or assisted living adult daycare. Kill as many birds with one stone as you can. Who makes money at a bank? The bank. Right now, the money that we have setting in savings is not setting in a bucket at the bank. It's loaned to a guy paying 9% for a car. That's how banks exist. Is that fair? No. It's like my dad's loan. So if challenge number 5 is a concern to you, mark challenge number 5, healthcare. Challenge number 6, investor error. The stock market's been very interesting the last few years, to say the least. The thing about the stock market is what you don't know can hurt you. Now I want everybody to flip their yellow pieces of paper over for me real quick. I'm going to teach you a little trick. This is what I like to call the ask me scenario. I always like ask me signs. You ever notice everywhere you go now is an ask me. Ask me how to save 10% today on your purchase here at Macy's, or ask me how to get 19% return off this mutual fund, or ask me how you can do this, ask me how you can do that. Write 1, 2, 3, 4 on a piece of paper. We're going to talk about a stock market. We're going to talk about numbers. Because when it comes to financial planning, if you sit down with someone and they do a review with you and they set someone on the table and it goes boom, and there's all these fancy graphs and all this kind of stuff, run. Because when it comes to financial planning, all that matters is what did I start with and what do I have now? That's all that matters. I'm going to teach you a little trick, because when I drove here tonight, I had to go to Urbana. I had an uncle pass away, and I had to go over there and settle some stuff. And I was coming through Urbana, I passed a Fifth Third Bank, an Edward Jones, and another place. All had big ask me signs in the front window. Ask me how to get 17%. We're going to talk about 4 years in the stock market. We got $100,000. Now the first year, we hit a complete home run, and we get a 100% return. How much do we have now? 200, right? 200,000 beside the number 1, because that's how much we got at the end of year 1. Year 2, we get some bad advice, we get a bad tip, and we lose 50%. How much do we have now? 100,000. Write that beside number 2. Year 3, we go back to the original guy, home run again, 100% return. How much do we have now? 200,000. We'd be celebrating if that happened. Year 4, we lose 50%. How much do we have? Okay. How much money have we made? None. But Math teaches us one thing, is numbers can be manipulated. If you have 2 years of positive 100%, that gives you a positive 200%. And if you have 2 years of negative 50%, it gives you a negative 100%. So how much do you have if you take a negative 100% away from a positive 200%? Positive 100. Now divide that by 4, that's 25% return. Ask me how. But that's the number, and that's real math. And unfortunately, that exists. Do I have any engineers in the room? Engineers are, one right back here, engineers are some of my favorite people. Over the years, engineers have taught me financial planning sometimes because I'll lay a prospectus down on the table, it's 300 pages, and my engineer clients will read it, all of it. And they'll come back and ask me questions I've never heard of before, but it's a challenge, and it's always fun. I got a gentleman I retired a few years ago who's a double threat. He's not only an engineer, but he's the president of the engineering library at the Defense Command Center. So this guy's an engineer on steroids. Now, I dealt with him for years, 9, 10 years, getting ready for retirement. He's 60 years old. I come to him, I said, Bob, we got to get your 401k out of there. I know you're retiring next year, we got to get it moved because of the markets, time. He said, Jerry, I can't. The Lincoln lady was here yesterday, and I just did 17% in the last quarter. I said, you did? Yeah, the Lincoln lady, Lincoln Financial. I said, go get me your 401k statements. He didn't go get me his statements. He got me 3 notebooks of 35 years worth of statements. We went back 10 years. We wrote down the value of his 401k 10 years ago. We took the amount coming out of his paycheck and the amount the employer was matching, and we took it times 26 paychecks in a year, times the 10 years, and we looked at the rate of return. What did we start with? What did we end with? His average rate of return for that 10 years was 1.7% a year. You know what he said to me? It was always going up. It's because you were adding money to it, and they were adding money. But how did he do 17% last quarter? Because numbers can be manipulated. All that matters when the rubber meets the road, how much did I hand you? How much do I got now? The rest is fancy talk. 90% of Americans don't have a proper financial plan. If you invest in bonds or bond funds, you might be taking unwanted and unnecessary interest rate risk. And investing in mutual funds may not be the best way for some people to invest in the market. When you think about home runs, who do you think about? Babe Ruth. Who, sir? Babe Ruth. Anybody else? Hank Aaron? Mickey Mantle? Steroids? No, I'm just joking. But we think about Babe Ruth. And Babe Ruth always reminds me of when I go to a party or I go to a picnic and people find out what I do for a living. They always come over to me and they go, oh, I got a buddy of mine. And he took $10,000 out of his 401k, and it's worth $300 million now. It's just the most amazing thing in the world. And you know why? Because Babe Ruth, that was the newspaper. That's what everybody remembers. Babe pointing at the fence. Everybody likes talking about the home runs. But guess what? Babe did 6-to-1 over hitting home runs. He struck out, which means he did a lot more of that than he did of that. Volatility happens. Bonds and interest rate risk. Some of my favorite words in the world, one of my favorite ones is when I come in, somebody comes into my firm and they lay their portfolio down and they go, don't worry, I'm diversified. Now, you could truly be diversified, or you could go to someone that just says, okay, I'm going to cut this right down the middle and half your money's in growth and half your money's in bonds, which is about 99% of the time somebody comes in my office. Half money's in bonds, half money in growth. Has anybody ever rode a teeter-totter in here when they were little? When you were down, where was your buddy? And when he was down, where were you? And where was your buddy that was sitting in the middle? Same place all the time. He didn't move. Because the bottom line is if interest rates rise 2% over a 1-year period of time, long-term bond mutual fund prices will drop 14. That means if you're gaining in your growth area of your portfolio, the other side is dying. And when the other side goes up, this side's going down. Which means sometimes if you're right smack dab in the middle, you're the guy right there in the middle getting nothing. I've seen portfolios diversified to the point where there was no growth. No, there was no loss. But unfortunately, if I have $100,000 10 years ago and I have $100,000 today, does it buy the same thing? No. The buy-hold argument. This is a broker's best friend. January 1st, 1980 through December 31st, 2002, the S&P averaged 9.55% return. That's almost 10% return for 22 years. But what if? What if we missed the best 10 days? Well, now we're down to 7. That's still not bad. What if we missed the best 20 days or 30? What if we missed the best 40 days in 22 years? 40 days in 22 years, our rate of return goes from 9.5 to 2. Volatility happens. What goes up must come down. Has anybody rode a roller coaster when they were little? How long did it take to get to the top? Tick, tick, tick. How long did it take once the first car started going over the hill? Pretty fast. The mathematics of money. For each step backwards, you must take an even bigger step forward. If you've got $100,000 and you lose 20% return, you have to gain 25 to break even. If you lose 40, you've got to gain 66 to break even. And we just learned if we lose 50, we've got to gain 100% return just to get level again. 92 through 2005, the S&P averaged 12.98% return. What do you think the average day trader did in the United States? Any guesses? Great guess. 3.51%. Who's ever heard of variable annuities in here? Couple people? Variable annuities are something you have to be very, very careful of. Banks, Edward Jones, Smith Barney, they love variable annuities. Why? Because they have extremely high fees. Banks only make money by generating fees and through leverage. Not only do they have high fees, but they have hidden costs. They have fees for the life of the contract. You could have one of these contracts, it could be 20 years old, and you're still paying fees. Some offer no guarantee of principal whatsoever. You actually pay more in fees if your account value increases. The average $100,000, $1,000 variable annuity fee structure in the United States, very simple. The first fee is what's called a mortality and expense charge. That means you hand me $100,000, I'm going to charge you 1.2% every year. So if you pass away, I'm giving you your 100 grand back. Every year, 1.2. You have administrative charges. If you never see that banker, that broker that put you into that variable annuity ever again, you're going to pay administrative charges every single year for the rest of your life. You pay sub-account charges. That's where banks kind of get you. Because when you go to buy a mutual fund, they always say, oh, you've got to pay 5.75% load. But you don't have to pay that load with this variable annuity. No, that's true. You don't pay it up front. You pay 1% a year the rest of your life, every year. Riders, or what I call bells and whistles. Every single time you see the word rider in that contract, add a percent. If it's got 3 riders, you're paying 3. If it's got 1, you're paying 1. That means the average charges annually to a variable annuity average in the United States 3.8% a year. That's $3,800 a year in fees. That means in 10 years, you're going to pay $38,000 in fees in one of these contracts. I reviewed one of these last week that had $800,000 in it. It was 4 years old. Do the math on 4% times $800,000 for 4 years. She had zero idea there was any fees. In fact, in 15 years of reviewing these types of contracts, I've met one person that knew they were paying fees. Upside, downside, equities, mutual funds. You get to full upside potential. If that mutual fund does 20% return, you get all 20%. If it loses 30, you lose 30. There is an alternative solution. There is a way of sharing in a percentage of the upside of the market with complete downside protection and a minimum rate of return. Now, I'm going to say that again. There's a way of sharing the upside of the market with complete protection against the downside and a guaranteed minimum rate of return. You share in the upside, and the company takes all the risk. Those are called indexed annuities. Indexed annuities are annuities that mirror a certain market index. You can mirror the S&P 500. You could mirror the NASDAQ. You could mirror the Dow Jones. Now, this is an example of an indexed annuity mirroring the S&P 500. So let's say year one, we buy into the S&P at 1,215 points, and we put in $100,000. Year one, the S&P goes up to 1,364 points. We share in the return. We're at 110,000. Year two, the S&P shoots up again to 1,500 points. We share in a return. We're at 121,000. But what goes up has to come down. So year three, the stock market crashes. We drop down to 1,000 points. We don't lose a dime. We don't lose a dime. In fact, we share in any return in a calendar year. So even though we bought in at 1,215 points, if there is a gain this year, we share in it. So from that point, from 1,000 points, the next year it rebounds up to 1,100 points. We share in that return. You could look at a 5-year period of time where you started at 1,215 points, you finished at 1,210 points and get that type of return. What do you need to know about fixed indexed annuities? First thing you need to know is you want an A-rated company or better. There are literally thousands of financial institutions in the United States now. Everyone's trying to get into this business. The light bulbs in this room, General Electric, everybody's heard of them, right? Up until 2 years ago, there was a General Electric Financial Services at the Polaris Mall. GE. Every month when I get my American Express statements, they're trying to get me to meet with an Ameriprise investor. They're trying to get into business. I was at Kroger, and in the line at Kroger, you can now buy homeowners insurance, renters insurance, auto insurance, and now they're talking about mutual funds. I asked the girl if I could get gas credit, but she had a bunch of stuff stuck in her face, and she just kind of looked at me. Everyone is trying. There might be a dozen companies I'd put money with in the United States. Do research, Standard & Poor's, get on the internet. This determines solvency, which is important. An A-rated company or better can back your money 100%. There are companies out there that have 105% solvency, meaning if you give them $100,000, they're backing it with $105,000. The only way you're going to know is by doing the research. What's the company rated? You want a company that has no more than 5% of their money in junk bonds. Junk bonds are like loaning money to your little brother. You might get it back, you might not. That's junk bonds. 100% participation rate. You want to participate in 100% of the growth of the market. If we're sharing in a return, I want to share in all of the return. No fees. We want a lock-in feature. What that means is that at some point you can come to them and say, give me XYZ amount of money the rest of my life, and if something happens to me, make sure my wife gets it the rest of her life. That's locking in an income. But what if? What if the market goes crazy the year after he locks in his income? We want to be able to annually reset it. So if this year you're getting $3,000 a month and you know for a fact it can't ever go below that and she'll get that, but the market goes crazy, you can annually reset it. Now it's $3,150. So if it's to our advantage to annually reset it, we want that ability. We want to count value at death, lump sum to our loved ones. We want a nursing home waiver in the event of something happening to our health care. We want a terminal illness waiver, so we can access all of those funds in the event of something happening to our health. We want a 10% penalty-free withdrawal for major purchases. And the most important part of all this, we want a non-two-tier system. There are banks out there that are still doing two-tier contracts, which means you hand them $1 million. The only way to get it back is monthly. If something happens to you, the only way for your kids to get it back is monthly until it runs out somewhere down the line generations. You may have a way out of an annuity or insurance contract you're unhappy with. Who's old enough to remember when insurance companies came door to door? That many people? Those are called debit companies. And my grandfather used to tell me about a guy coming around with a burlap sack to the farm, and he'd give him 16 cents every week to pay his life insurance premiums. I had a lady come into my firm last year. She had one of these contracts. She had no idea what it was, but it had $83,462 in cash in it. Back when she was younger, it was fashionable to buy a child a life insurance contract. An uncle bought her this contract. He gave it to her late in life. It was worth $141,000 if she passed away. Now, she was healthy, and she had 2 kids, and she just wanted it to be worth what it was if something happens to her. We took a 1035 exchange, which is a tax code. We moved that money from one contract to another, and now her new death benefit is $244,000. She increased her estate $103,000, and it didn't cost her a dime. We will review all of those insurance contracts for you. Every company has their own terminology when it comes to these contracts. So if investor error is something you're concerned with, I'd like you to mark challenge number 6, investor error. And last but not least, challenge number 7, IRA and 401k distributions. Who's been to the new casino? Who's been to other casinos? There we go. This is the most honest group of people I've ever had. Whenever I ask people if they, am I wrong, Tom? He's been to a couple workshops. When I ask people who goes to casinos, everybody's like, not us. Yet, what are in casinos when you walk in? A lot of seniors playing the slot machines. Just they never come to my workshops. I appreciate the honesty in this room. Who are the odds on when you go to Vegas? The house. Have you ever realized that your 401ks and your IRAs, they're so complicated because the odds are on who? The government. They want to be able to get you somewhere along the way. Many tax plans are tax time bombs. What do you think the government's largest asset right now is? Social Security. Somebody else? Obama. Oh, jeez. Don't get that started, my goodness. IRAs are the largest asset. You guys, you're the largest asset to the government for the simple fact that all of you have put money into IRAs, 401ks, savings accounts, tax deferred, and they know right now basically what you're setting on. Because your accountant had to report every year whether you put money into an IRA. Your employer had to report every single year how much they put into the 401k. So you are the largest asset. Because they know when you turn 70 and a half, guess what happens? They're going to force you to start taking income. They know how much revenue they've got coming in next year when all those people hit that age. More retirement plans are at risk. You're 70, you said? 71. If somebody walked in your grandfather's living room and said, you know, someday a company will come along and write a check for Conrail, he'd have fell out of his chair laughing. I handle Columbia Gas retirees in Columbus. A few years ago, a company came along called NiSource and wrote a check for Columbia Gas. And then anybody under 15 years in service received a letter and they said, we're thinking about this pension program and we're not sure we're going to keep it. That's a scary letter to get when you're 14 years, 9 months. Many retirement plans don't have proper beneficiary designations. Anybody working on a second marriage in here? Right back there. I'm just going to assume you guys. Let's say that this guy worked at General Motors and had 401k. You did? There you go. He did actually work at General Motors. Married to an evil woman, just mean to him. And then he got divorced and found this angel. And then years later, he passes away, but he forgot to do something to that 401k. And that'll be the only time in his life where being dead will be to his advantage. It doesn't happen a lot. About once a year, I'll have somebody referred to me, and I know by the look on their face already what's happened. It's not uncommon. It just happens. Many retirees make distribution errors that cost them tens of thousands of dollars. Now, this is an average IRA distribution. We've got Dan and Beulah. They have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. If something happens to them, that's exactly the way they want the money distributed. So what they do on their beneficiaries is they say, okay, we're the Culps. Laura Culp, Dan Culp, those are our beneficiaries, done. But what if? What if Laura predeceases her parents? And they assume Laura's money will go to her children. It doesn't work that way. If Laura's not there, all of it goes to Dan, the rest goes to Mitchell and Cole, and there's Rusty and Ryan standing out in the cold. Now you can assume that Dan and Laura get along and Dan's always liked Laura's husband. Those are families, and that doesn't always happen. But, see those words up there? I want you to write these words down. Per stirpes. That's free legal advice. A lawyer will charge you to do this. I see it all the time. If you want your money to pass through Laura in the event of her not being there at the time of your death, simply add the word per stirpes to the end of her name. If her name is Laura Culp, write Laura Culp per stirpes. Dan Culp per stirpes. What it is it's a term that means pass through. It means if that person's not alive, follow the bloodline. Let the money then transfer down to the next generation. You can do that to your bank accounts, your IRAs, your 401ks, your life insurance contracts. It's free. Don't let anybody ever charge you for that. If you own a 401k, a 403b, or 457, you might want to roll it into a 401k, or an IRA, excuse me. IRAs can be stretched to your heirs. IRAs have more estate planning options. IRAs have more investment choices. They can be converted to Roth IRAs. They have greater flexibility, availability, and control. You can consolidate IRAs. You might have a bunch of little IRAs you do with an accountant, and then you got a 401k, and then you got this little pension. You can put them all together. They're portable, and you have access to professional advice. In the 15 years I've been doing this, I've handled 9 lottery winners. Take a guess how long the average lottery winner is in this country between when they win the lotto and when they are broke. 5 years. 39 months is the average across the United States. That's the average. So if you win the Powerball for 20 million, or you win a scratch off for 1 million. In about 39 months, you're broke again, and you're calling your buddy up to get your job back. Now, I joked around about little brothers a minute ago, and I did that because you might see this vein pop up on my forehead, because I've got a 33-year-old little brother still lives at home. In fact, he doesn't live at home. He lives in my parents' house, and they moved to a rental property. So it's a sensitive subject, to say the least. Now, if something happened to my parents, and a big lump sum of money was poured onto my little brother, his first stop would be where General Motors used to be, and his next stop would be across the street for a new Corvette. Then his third stop would be, Jerry, can I live in your basement? And his fourth stop would be, no. That, unfortunately, inheritance can sometimes be like winning the lottery, getting that lump sum. Now, my dad's an old Irish guy, and he uses the term come into the well. He always says, Billy came to the well again last night. And I said, well, tell Bill the well is dry. Sometimes the well is gone in 39 months after something happens. So ask yourself this. If you're 30 years old, you got 2 kids, and uncle dies, and you could inherit $100 grand lump sum or $2 grand a month for the rest of your life you could never outlive, which one would you understand more? Those are called stretch IRAs. A stretch IRA allows you to make a determination for your children about their inheritance. A stretch IRA says, okay, instead of dumping $200,000 on your head, I'm going to give you $2,100 a month the rest of your life that you can never outlive. The $2,100 they can fathom. They understand how to use it. They can budget it. They know it's not going away. The $200,000 might be gone in a matter of months. Stretch IRA. An IRA owner, 70 and a half, has a $100,000 IRA. Without stretching it, he'll take $112,421 in required minimum distributions in his lifetime, leaving the IRA balance at death $130,000 lump summed onto someone's head. Or he could assign a beneficiary and stretch that IRA. That beneficiary inherits that money at age 30 and takes it monthly. He will receive $1,466,871 over his average life expectancy. Now, when I say average life expectancy, I'm saying 80 years old. I'm not talking about the Welch's grape jelly people from Good Morning America at 110. Average life expectancy. Increase that payout. Know for a fact today that that money will be dealt with properly the rest of their lives. Retirement plan taxation. The first thing they can get you on is if you have federal, state, and income taxes, 10 to 45%. Second way they'll get you, too soon penalty. You touch that money too soon, they ding you for 10. If you don't take your required minimum distributions, they will hit you for 50%. If your RMD's $5 grand, the penalty's $2,500 if you try and avoid taking it. Current federal estate taxes, 45 to 48%. Current state estate tax, 0 to 6%. Just like in Vegas, the odds are on the house. They've got a chance of getting you up to 75% some point in your lifetime. Time your withdrawals. Sit down with your tax professionals and determine how much you want to take out. Now this is $14,659, it's a 15% federal bracket. The reason I show you that is if you make $50,000 a year retirement income and your car's got 60,000 miles and you know in 3 years you're going to need a new car, does it make sense to take $59,000 for 3 years, save the money and pay cash for the car? Or does it make sense to wait 3 years and take out $85,000 and pay 10% more than you need to for the car? Every year, sit down with a professional and say, are we going to need a new roof? Do we need to do some home improvements? Are we wanting to take a big vacation? Are we going to need a new car? Time your withdrawals. Make sure you never pay the government more than you need to. Now, only if there was a plan that didn't require you to take required minimum distributions unless you chose, that allowed you to receive any of those distributions 100% tax-free, that allowed you to pass any remaining balance on to your heirs 100% tax-free. That does exist. That's called the Roth IRA. And the Roth IRA is a tremendous financial planning tool for seniors. Now, I had a gentleman come in. He had a $150,000 401k. Completely taxable money. He wanted to give it to his children. He was 65. His big fear was his dad lived to be 94, and he thought, if I take this money and I just pop it into a little 2% collecting CD somewhere, the RMDs will devalue my IRA every single year the rest of my life, and they won't inherit the $150,000. Now, the first thing I told him, are they going to inherit $150,000? Do you think they'll inherit $150 grand if he passes away? No, it's 401k money. The one was an accountant, the other one was a dental hygienist. What that basically means is if they inherit $75,000, they're losing 30% right away because they're going to pay tax. Then they're going to turn around and lose another maybe 10% of that money because they're going to have to pay more tax on their income that year. If you make $75,000 and you inherit $75,000, your taxable income that year is $150,000, which means your employer didn't take out enough tax that entire year. So right away, that inheritance takes a huge hit. So we looked at a way of getting rid of the tax consequence from this 401k. We looked at a way of converting it into a Roth IRA. What we did is we turned around and we separated it again into 5 separate IRAs. That first IRA is an immediate payout IRA. Does everybody remember that first when we first started talking? Only in this scenario, he took it annually. Just took one lump sum a year instead of taking it monthly. Year 1, he took the income from that IRA of $8,520 and he converted the 5th IRA. That's now a Roth IRA. Tax-free to us if we need the money. Tax-free to the kids in the event of premature death. Year 2 rolled around. He took the income from the first IRA and he converted the 3rd and 4th IRAs. Those are now Roth IRAs. Tax-free to him if he needs the money. Tax-free to his kids in the event of premature death. Year 3 took another income off the first IRA and converted the 2nd IRA. So in 3 years, he's converted all 4 of the remaining IRAs. They are now Roth IRAs. They are now 100% tax-free, and they are tax-free to his kids in the event of his premature death. What have they been doing for 3 years? Growing, compounding, gaining interest. Now, he couldn't figure out what to do with the 4th year, so I told him just to take that money and take a cruise. Now, I know the last couple weeks, cruises have taken a little hit. But it said cruise for years, so I couldn't change it. And because this group has been so lively, I'll make you this promise. If you can't figure out what to do with the 5th year, you can take me on a cruise. If it breaks down, I'll fan you and feed you grapes and all that fun stuff. What have we accomplished by separating the money this way? We took $150,000 fully taxable money and we converted it into 4 separate IRAs that are now Roth IRAs that are now tax-free to us and tax-free to our kids, totaling $40,000, $30,000, $22,000, and $67,000. So in 5 years, we started with $150,000 fully taxable. We finished with $160,000 tax-free. Tax-free to us, tax-free to the kids in the event of our premature death. 5-step action plan for protecting your IRAs and retirement plans from near annihilation of the tax man. First step, insure it. We're headed into a very weird time in this country, financially. And unfortunately, the government is in a very big turmoil state right now also. I don't know if anybody watches the news, but it's not puppy dogs and rainbows. Get your money somewhere where someone actually has money to back it. There are financial institutions out there that if you hand them a certain amount of money, they can back it 100%. Time your withdrawals. Sit down with your tax professional every year and never break those tax thresholds. Avoid it. Get your money and your assets into something that will avoid probate and estate tax. Stretch it. Talk to your kids. I have people bring their kids into my firm and they're like this. This guy's trying to take mom and dad's money. And when they leave, are you sure this is going to work? Yes, it's worked for years. If they understand it, they will accept it. And it's something that can create a legacy for a bloodline. And Roth it, because no tax bracket is less than 0. Challenge number 7, IRA 401k distributions. Did you learn some of the answers you were seeking by coming here today? Did some of this hit home for you? And more importantly, did any of this information apply to your situation? I own J. Kennedy Financial Group. I don't work for Huntington Bank. I don't work for Fidelity. I don't work for John Hancock. I'm a fiduciary planner. I work for my clients. It's my job to sit down with you and determine your goals, and then we go out there and find a financial institution to meet those goals. How does it work and how does it get started? Simply check the box on your goal sheet to schedule a free 59-minute maximizer analysis. Everyone in this room lives 10, 15 miles from everyone else. When they invited us into this area 10 years ago, we decided we come in at the same time every year so we could review money with existing clients and meet new people at the same time while we're in this area. I come from this area, like I said, it's very near and dear to my heart. In fact, I grew up on this is West Broad Street to a guy like me. I grew up on Route 40, and if you head down towards Columbus and you go by the 10-mile inn, the first house on the right is a green house, and depending on the day, my parents might still claim me. But if you do stop and check him out, ask him about that loan, because that's fact. There's absolutely no obligation during our first meeting. We can determine your dreams, your goals. More importantly, we can show how much we can improve your retirement picture. I'm so confident this time will be time profitably invested that if you feel your time is wasted, I'll write a check for $50 to your favorite charity, as long as you aren't your favorite charity. I've had that one get me in the past. There's only one catch. There's a lot more of you than there are of me. When they invite us into these areas, we have to schedule our time so we can go out and visit people and meet new people, because we can only do a limited amount of free obligation, free maximizer analysis because of my commitment to my existing clients. Now, if I could my existing clients that are in this room raise their hands? If you want to look around, you want to ask these people and make sure I haven't made off with their money. Nobody ever gets that joke. Did you hear that joke? That was a stunner. I haven't made off with their money. No one ever gets that one. My goodness. I've blocked off time in the next 2 weeks to meet with people in this group. Unfortunately, our Tuesday meeting was just as big, if not a little bigger than this one. It'll probably be the next 5, 6, 7 weeks, but I promise you that if you want to meet, we will find the time to sit down and we'll have a good time. Simply mark what day of the week works best for you, whether you're a morning or evening person. And as we close, I encourage you to drink, swear, steal, and lie. Drink from the fountain of love and friendship of your fellow man. Swear to make each day the best day of your life. Steal a little time every day for your family and friends. And lie in bed at night and thank God for the good times, but also thank Him for the bad times, since the bad times make the good times feel that much better. Please don't stand up and applaud. It just makes me really cocky. Our workshop's not unlike a car engine. Every aspect of the workshop and every person within the workshop has their own role. And when that car engine is put together, they fire off of each other and they work effectively. You are the expert. You are the person that is trained in this field to help people. You are the financial professional. Your assistant plays the role of going around and meeting the clients and establishing an appointment time, establishing a rapport, and giving them an idea of how precious your time truly is. We're not here to make you work harder. We're here to make you work smarter. Your assistant is in the room to set the appointments and to introduce the professional, the expert, which is you.
All right. Do you need to see Jerry for anything?
All right, talk to him.
Okay, so you're good. All right. Well,
But you know what? Give him this anyway, so
Per Sturfees, that
so
was a
he
good
don't
one.
forget.
That's a good freebie, huh?
just so he don't forget.
Yeah, and I'll keep coming back because I'll see a gold sheet here. That's what I do. All right, now what do you have going on, Scott?
No, I'm good.
You're good?
In pretty good shape. I want to get with Jared on a trust later.
Okay.
I'm good on it for now.
Okay, here's what you're going to do.
Okay.
If you don't want to schedule your appointment right now, on your way out, I'm going to make a note on your gold sheet that you have an interest in a trust. If you don't want to schedule anything right now, we'll probably call you back in about 6 weeks and just give you time to go home and think about how you want to do it. And I'll make a note on here that you have an interest in a trust. But grab the sheets that are on the table out there, okay, because it has all our contact information on it. We're going to go over here. I'm going to block out some time for you. They're going to bring you back a confirmation sheet. If you get home, doesn't work with your wife, you can call us back and we'll reschedule it. We just want to make sure we block out some time for you. Okay? All right, sweetie, what you got going on?
I'd like to look at rolling my 401k into something more.
That'll be something you'll want to talk to him about. Anything that is going to be important to you, if you know it's going to be important before he comes out, have whatever paperwork ready. So you know, just make sure he has time to review it. Okay? I'm glad to see that you're working with somebody at Fifth Third, but especially if you're working at the bank proprietary, you might want to just sit down with somebody else and see what they have to offer. But regardless, we're not here to push any appointments on you today, but go ahead. We'll call you back in about 6 weeks. See if you changed your mind. But grab some contact information on your way out. And it's 6 o'clock on a Monday.
Any day is fine. Monday and Tuesday works best for us.
Okay.
But
These are best.
Any
Right?
day is fine. But he doesn't get off work till 5, and he works in Columbus.
Okay, so it has to be
So-
after 5.
Yeah.
All right, sweetie.
Yeah,
Okay,
'cause he
that's
gets-
fine. That's fine. I gotcha. I will be right back, okay?
When I meet people, people instantly assume that I'm an 80, 90 hour a week guy. That the only way to write 7, 8 million a year in premium is to just work much harder than the guy next to you. I don't work harder than the guy next to me. I think I work smarter than the guy next to me. I look at it and I say to myself, I can still maintain those banker's hours, and I can still show up at the ballet recitals, and I can still take my wife to dinner on a Thursday evening. I can still manage my family life and be there and be present for all the things that I want to see over their lifetimes, but at the same time affect the lifetimes of the people I'm looking to help. I'm not trying to get you to work harder. I'm trying to get you to work smarter. I'm trying to get you in front of people that need your expertise. I'm trying to get you in front of people that have money set aside, that they've accumulated over their lifetime, and they're looking for advice, good ethical advice on how to fix these things. I'm trying to streamline your practice. I'm trying to help you develop a firm, and I'm here to mentor you, to show you how I've done this over the years. In closing, I challenge you. I challenge you to ask yourself how passionate you are about truly helping people. I challenge you to think about the next generation and how much you want to impact the world that we live in. My passion comes from the ability that I truly care about each and every client I sit down with. When I sit at a table, I look at those folks as if it was my mother and father, and I think about what would I want someone to do for them. And that's the passion that Aptus shared with me when they approached me about this workshop. So now I challenge you, is your passion strong enough to pick up the phone and call Aptus Marketing and talk about how to get licensed so that you can start impacting people's lives?